Good day everyone, this is Marjol Marmis Brosi and I am the first reporter for Module 2 Communication and Globalization. These are the talking points. First is the connection between communication and globalization. Second is the advantages and disadvantages of globalization. Third is cultural barriers of communication. But before I start, let me ask you first, are you familiar with Coca-Cola drinks? Or how about the United States Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization or UNESCO? Well, I know you are because these two examples I have here are so famous and we will use these examples for us to understand as we swim deeper for today's topic. Well, aside from living in easiest and advanced world, we also live in globalized world where we come across people from all walks of life. These encounters occur in a variety of settings including the private, educational, political, and commercial. And to strengthen intercultural understanding and competency, we must realize the relationship between communication and globalization in today's age of increased global connectedness. By the way, what is communication? Based on Merriam-Webster, communication is the act or process of using words, sounds, signs, or behaviors to express or exchange information or to express your ideas, thoughts, feelings, or etc. The statement is so clear that communication has vital roles in our lives today, maybe through the aid of technology. We have Android phones, we have social media accounts like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, for us to connect with other people even in international. But take note, communication will not take place only in technology because there are some international trade that still use writing communication for their business or trade. These two people I have here is an example that shows process of communication through the aid of technology. Next, what is globalization? Globalization is contact and assimilation between individuals, ethnicities, cultures, organizations, government of different nations, enabled by technology and guided by international trade. It means that if you are exposed to globalization, then you are also exposed to individuals, ethnicities, cultures, gender identity, color, age, enabled by technology and guided by international trade. If we are also going to talk about globalization, it is also about interconnectedness, which is sharing of culture. Best example is Korean pop stars or Korean music. It is spread by media to the point that it's spread globally. And we can deny the fact that most of us, especially Filipinos, teenagers, are influenced by K-pop. And we adopt their culture. That is why it is part of globalization. Next is the question I have asked a while ago about Coca-Cola and UNESCO. Coca-Cola is part of international trade. It is one of the refreshing drinks that satisfied our thirst. Communication for their company matters because it allows them to send message or receive message from other country or to the other country. And next is UNESCO. UNESCO is a globalized organization that has 193 country members, including our country, Philippines. And they have a goal which is to promote peace in culture, and communication to them matters because it fosters freedom of expression. It allows them to exchange ideas or share ideas towards other country members. Globalization is widely regarded as new phenomenon, but it is not because it has people already come into contact. And we are just so fortunate that technology is invented because it is through technology that without technology rather there would be no globalization because it is through technology that we extend our social control in the dimension of space and time.
This is the advantages of globalization. Number one, lead to many millions of people being lifted out of poverty. So, economic growth is the main channel through which globalization can affect poverty. So, in general, when countries open up to trade, they tend to grow faster and living standard tend to increase. The usual argument goes to the benefits of this higher growth tricks down to the poor. So makatabang yapon siya sa mga pobre, no? Number 2 has not only allowed nations to trade with each other but also to cooperate each other. Kani siya kanang dili lang siya kanang maka negosyo ra yung ipang istoryahan, pero maka-meet ka og laing tao bitaw kan daghan kag friends tungod anang globalization. So nag-add ko og duha ka example. Number 3, the cheaper goods mo siya akong ni-add. Cheaper goods and services for consumers. Globalization encourage both consumers and producers to benefit from trade. So pantay siya, no? So number 4, transfer ideas stimulates innovation. So kani maka-stimulate jud ka kung tungod sa globalization kay na may mga idea nga imong makita. So pag mag-gather nimo, maka-stimulate siya og innovation kanang something new ba. So proceed ta sa disadvantages. Number 1, while some areas have flourished, others have plundered as jobs and commerce moved elsewhere. Still companies ay example kanang ang company bitaw sa UK na siya kuan kanang daghan gisa nagtrabaho, nag-provide ni siya og 100,000 people nga gatrabaho, but na may nakakompetensya bitaw ang China nga nagbuhat mo sila cheaper steel plant. Ang planta sa kuan UK na close, so daghan ang na wadan og trabaho. So mo ni ang nakaluoy. So number 2, every step forward in technology brings with a new dangers. Kanang sa example karon sa kanang cellphone, di ba, magdaot ang ato ang tungod ang technology, magdaot ng ato ang mata. So example kung sa China, kung makaimbento sila og robot, makadaot ya po na siya kay imbis na atay work na masweldo ang tao, wala na noon kay na may kuan, na may robot. Number 3, while many have been lifted out of poverty, not everybody has benefited. So bisan pagyapon og nay ni angat sa inyong kinabuhi or sa ubang lugar na ni angat, pero di man gyapon tanan ng country ang naka-benefits, gamay ra man gyapon. So number 4, it is not helping to close the gap between the world's poorest and richest nation. Dili mong gid makatabang sa pagwala sa boundary sa pagkadato or pobre sa atong nasod, kay ang dato nga lugar mas mudato og samot, o ang pobre musamot og kapobre. Same sa Africano, kay wala mong gud sila kayo gadgets dito, so di kay sila magka-improve. Number 5, could lead an apparent peace or prosperity done poorly to disaster. Leading charity Oxfam says that when corporations such as Starbucks can legally avoid paying tax, the global inequality crisis worsens. So masamot. Basically, done wisely, in the words of the International Monetary Fund, globalization could lead to an apparent peace and prosperity done poorly to disaster.
Communication and globalization. Since then, communication has become increasingly global. Blurring national boundaries, the ability to communicate effectively in a global environment can be a challenge. Therefore, to interact effectively in a global sense, a general awareness of variations in communication from one country to another or from one community to another helps prevent miscommunication. That is why communication is very important in globalization, because without communication, we cannot easily adapt other cultures, and it can cause also a cultural barriers. People's history and experience affect their view of the world, and the principal attitudes and patterns of actions are considered to be healthy. The following are the possible cultural barriers to effective communication in global context. So first is the cultural relativism. It is the ability to consider a culture in its own terms and not to make assumptions based on the norms of one's own society. This leads us to view that no culture is superior to any other culture in terms of morality, laws, politics, and religion. The cultural relativism has the goal to promote understanding of cultural practices that are not typically part of one's own culture. And one of the example of that is the feet binding in China, which symbolizes beauty. So for them, it symbolizes beauty. So we need to respect their beliefs and culture. And also, speaking of respect, one of the examples is the McDonald's food chain. McDonald's food chain is a food globalization. Their vegetarian burger shows respect towards other cultures, like for example, and especially to Indian and Islam. Next is the lack of knowledge of other cultures. It is cultural ignorance is when an individual shows lack of understanding of other cultures in terms of history, society, government, and much more. It can be interpreted as a lack of respect for the culture or country of the other, especially when we are not familiar about their cultures. Next is the discrimination and harassment. Discrimination means being treated differently or unfairly, while the harassment is illegal if it is based on personal characteristic or status protected under anti-discrimination laws. One of the examples is when you are joking inappropriate about their cultures. And lastly is the language differences. It is the most obvious barrier to communications as two people speaking two different languages and cannot communicate with each other. Like for example, we Filipino goes to China and we don't know how to speak Chinese. And also that Chinese don't know how to speak Bisaya. So there is the communication barrier. In order to achieve the desired outcome or response, the above obstacle must be properly addressed. It is the duty of the parties participating in the contact process to remove potential barriers to their exchange. The goal of effective global communication is to achieve communication that delivers the desired response, leading to harmonious connection. Here are some strategies to become an effective global communicators. First is the review communication principles. So there are at least 7 principles of communication. First is principle of clarity, principle of objective, principle of understanding the receiver, principle of consistency, principle of completeness, principle of feedback, and time. Next is the analyze the message receiver. It is where the receiver's task is to interpret the sender's message from both verbal and non-verbal. Next is be open to an accepting of cultures, other cultures. So what is that? So by accepting other cultures helps us to experience what it's like to be a member of different community than in our own. It is where we're not just focusing on our cultures, but also we need to adapt other cultures for us to understand and for us to understand them and respect their cultures. Next is learn about cultures and apply what is learned. And lastly, consider language needs. By considering language needs, it enables us to communicate our feelings, desires, and questions to the world around us. So this is the key terms. Thank you everyone. Have a nice day. The quiz link will be posted at the comment section prepared by Miss Botilla.